Anyone else? Yeah.
How are you allocating budget to the projects individually as well as collectively?
So, I guess what helped us as well, to start off with, was to have the full scope of what this project was intended to cover and deliver. So it actually encompasses 3 areas. One in relation to client-facing, billing, financials, etc. We have a piece which is going to be full automation of sales management, and then contracts. So because we had these chunks, in doing the inceptions, we also got an idea of how big the requirements were, and then the budget was allocated as a whole. And then as we migrate through inceptions on particular areas, we then isolate the budget for that piece. And so we now at a point where that's the budget we're working towards, and right now we way under budget compared to what we started with. And again, that's a good thing to tell the cost.
Just a question on the scope. Do you find that your original scope of where you started and where you thought you were wanting to be landed up to be very different to where you ended up?
Yes, very good question. So the scope, where we started and where we're going and where we are, whether it's changed, yes, it has changed. And I think it has changed for a couple of reasons. So you've landed up with overs and unders, if you know what I mean. So things we thought we needed in have been stripped out. Things we hadn't really documented are coming in as really important and valuable. And I think that often happens because when business is operating and trying to write down business requirements, often the stuff that we've forgotten is the most crucial thing. Because that's the stuff that's become what is called competent and unconscious. It's now in your DNA. You actually don't think that you must put all of this down. And you give IT one sentence and you hope that they get that that sentence means 50 things. And so what we're finding is as we unpacking this, we're realizing that this is no longer useful or valuable. And so a lot of that scope has gone away, and we've ended up under scope because of that process.
At the back there.
So, just 2 things. First one, you mentioned a number of times the difference between you had your waterfall methodology and the Agile methodology. I'm not sure whether it's too early in your Agile adoption phase, but how do you determine which project's going to be which methodology?
Very good question, and in fact my peers are asking the same right now because we're now considering how far do we take this. One thing that has become very clear to us out of this year's process is if you're doing custom dev, you're developing in-house,
Yep.
This is highly suitable. If you're developing products for your clients like we do, we'll prototype a data product, we'll put it together as a sales team based on our needs analysis, and we'll go and test it for the client. Then you get that going. So that time to market and that immediate feedback is excellent. That works really well. The one we haven't navigated yet, which is the space where the JSE operates in a lot, and that is that we will go and buy a trading engine. Now we don't go develop a trading engine, that's crazy, because there are bigger exchanges who have better engines and they've already got it all sorted out. So that's the space that we still need to go into, because you're basically bringing in a supplier who has a ready-made tool, and all you're doing is you're bringing it in and then you're determining how much do you customize, if at all, preferably not. And then of course you've got the integration into all your systems. What we're determining now is that it is highly likely that the integration there would be vital in terms of Agile, that would work very well. And then if you were going to do customization again, that would work quite well. I think the tricky part, which in fact my team is about to go into, is that we are now looking at the sales management system, which clearly we're not going to design in-house. There are lots of good tools out there, and we're going to bring them in. And now it's the engagement with that supplier to determine how they are going to navigate Agile with us. And you've got to be very conscious that it may not make sense to now force something on them that is not natural to the supplier. Because then they could walk away and say, well, you forced me to go down this path, and now if it's gone wrong, they can walk away. So those are the spaces that we're finding, we're navigating. And I think we're probably going to land up with hybrid, highly likely.
And then, so the second part is, and you touched on it earlier, the budgeting process. It's very much what you're talking about here is, because I'm going to have the same problem. Convincing business that they need to give me an open check and an open timeline. That's never going to happen. seems very much at odds with what we were speaking about earlier today and yesterday around, what was it, that's nice for you or something like that. It's great for you, good for you that you want to know what that's going to cost. That's not going to fly in my environment. How do you manage that?
Yeah, it is, and I think again, having started off with the BRS, we had a sense of how big we thought this budget was going to be or need to be. We also had a perception of what we thought the timeline should be. And you know that's always tricky, even in waterfall, because I think there's always underestimation of what all is involved. There's a perception by looking at the BRS of what business wants. IT has a perception of what they think it's going to take, and often you overstate those timelines. Or you'd end up cutting scope in order to fit in with the timeline as well. That also happens, and then you end up cleaning up afterwards. Damage control. So there is, to me, these two environments are really about, they both have excellent practices. Waterfall has got its merits because it's got the governance, it's got the documentation, that often in our environment you're going to need it. Budgeting, you can't go to board and say, well, you know, I don't know how long this is going to take. Just let me go. And that's never going to fly. But having some kind of scope and sort of cropping it down to, we're going to deliver to releases, we're going to see where that takes us, that's what we're going to peg it at, by looking at the head count you need, if you're doing custom dev, because you don't have an external provider. If you have an external provider, you're obviously just going out with RFIs and trying to get a sense. And then you've got a kind of scoped budget, which what we're doing is every 3 months we are revisiting and recalibrating to see, is it still right? What do we need to shift? Do we need to shift something else? But as I say, touch wood, up to now, we're not over budget, we're under budget, and you know, hopefully that will continue. We've still got another year to go. This project is due to finish by June next year. Everything that is intended to will be delivered complete. And I guess as we progress, keeping that in mind also becomes important as a way to check against, is this really that valuable? Or is it just a nice to have? Is it something that business thought is cute, but actually doesn't really bring any value to the business or the clients? And that also helps you calibrate the budget. And yes, I've got my CFO constantly on my left shoulder going, so where's the money going? And when can we amortize this and so on? Because all of those things become important for any listed company, for example. You can't just not have a sense of where you're going.
Guys, that's all the time we have for questions. Anna, thank you very much. Here's a little book. It'll be